Hey, what's up, gardening friends? Jeff here, Tropical Plant Party. How is everybody doing? If you're good, I'm great. And today, I wanted to talk about the Thanksgiving cactus or Christmas cactus. They're not the same plant, but where I live, they're sold under the same name. If you actually want the true Christmas cactus, it's a little bit more complicated getting a hold of it. And surely this looks familiar. We see them all over the place. And this was in one of my vlog videos a few weeks back when I repotted it. I don't really repotted it, just kind of pulled it out and stuck it into a different pot. Tried to not disturb the roots at all. I just want it to be in something that's a little bit more festive for the holidays. So, even though this is a Thanksgiving cactus, like I said, it's widely sold as a Christmas cactus. There are a few differences. One is that, well, the Thanksgiving cactus has these claw-like appendages here on the ends of its pads. Christmas cactus, they're just round. They don't have these little spiky guys in here. And the Christmas cactus blooms more towards Christmas, whereas the Thanksgiving cactus more towards, Thanksgiving. But that really varies. Sometimes mine bloom closer to Christmas, sometimes mine bloom closer to Thanksgiving. There are a lot of variables involved. We're going to talk about that. So this guy right here, this is the Schlumbergera Truncata, which is the Thanksgiving cactus. I believe the true Christmas cactus is Schlumbergera bucklei, I think. I'll type it out just to be safe. But this guy normally blooms for me starting early November and then is in bloom by Thanksgiving. But that does depend on our summers. So from that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about how I take care of this. I've been all over YouTube. There's tons of videos on these guys, so I'm not going to go crazy in depth on this because it's out there, it's been done. I have two different plants, and I'm going to show you both of them. So there's this guy right here, as you can see. This is multiple plants. They don't have different colored flowers on one plant. I just stuck multiple colors in one pot because I thought it'd be pretty. And I was right. It is pretty. Okay, and then there's this guy who is much larger. I've had this one for a much longer time. And I'm just almost a smidge too late with filming this because the flowers are just starting to go, but it does have new buds on it, so that's promising. And a piece of it broke off about a week ago, so we can talk about that too, maybe. Because I can use this very easily to start a new plant. If you're wondering why the huge size difference, really all it is in this particular situation is there were more plants potted up in this basket than over here. This is probably 3, whereas I think this has 5 or 6 in the basket. So that's the main reason there's such a huge size difference. It isn't so much their age. And now, both of these guys are due for a repotting, but that's not because they've gotten too big for their pots. It's really just because after a few years, you need to give them new soil so that they have new nutrients. These are from the rainforest. They grow in nooks and crannies and rocks and cliffs and in the trees, so they're used to having a compact space for their roots. So there's really no reason to keep potting them up into anything much larger than they need. I try and keep their pots on the smaller side, actually. But, like I said, they still need to be repotted every so often so that they have fresh nutrients because their roots completely deplete all the good stuff in their soil after a while. I do amend their soils. I use the Espoma tomato fertilizer, which is really just about fertilizing. I make sure they get that about once a month. And then sometimes I make sure to add in mycorrhiza and whatnot. And during the winter time, here in my grow space, they're watered with the aquaponics water. No chemicals, which helps reinvigorate that dirt that's in their pots, that soil. It helps get all the beneficial bacteria and fungi and everything going again. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there is a third variety of these guys that's called the Easter cactus. It's a Schlumbergera something or other. I can't remember its Latin name, but where I live, again, during the Easter time, they generally just sell these guys that have been forced to bloom, and they call them Easter cactus at Easter time. But they're not the same thing. As far as taking care of these goes, I'm going to start with winter and work my way through the year and come back, because most people get these in the fall or winter time. So when you get these guys home, I like to put them in a fairly bright window where they're going to get about 4 to 6 hours of light, and in a spot that's not too terribly warm. These guys are kind of cool growers, even though they're technically tropical cactus. 65 to 75 seems to be sort of the sweet spot for keeping their flower buds nice and healthy. And another thing I have found that's really important for their flower buds and maintaining the health and keeping them blooming is humidity. So I don't like to put them anywhere where they're going to be exposed to anything that's drying the air out, like, well, an air vent, so pumping out dry air. I put them near my sink, actually, in my window where there's water moving and things are a little bit more humid, and that seems to work fairly well. And that window's pretty cool. These guys, some of my orchids and my cyclamen do very well in those locations. If they get too much light, they may start to drop their buds, especially if the air's too dry. Also, if they're getting too much light, you'll start to notice reddish purpling along the leaves, and then white splotches can start to form, and they'll start to bleach out. So a little bit less is more when they're blooming. Point being here is they like sun, but it's not like a desert cactus where most of them can take scorching, burning sun. These are a rainforest cactus, meaning that there's likely stuff growing up above them, meaning they're going to get dappled light for the most part. Not always, though. Springtime. Spring is repotting season. You don't want to repot these guys while they're budding or blooming. Wait until spring. And I do think it's time for me to repot these, like I said. One of the reasons for that is that when I look at the leaves here, there's some discoloration and some symptoms that maybe there's some nutrient deficiencies, possibly a little teeny tiny smidge of chlorosis going on. And this is also kind of what can just happen when they have desiccated and become more bulbous, and they're getting plenty of water, and then they dry out a little bit, and that's probably just because during their blooming phase, when I'm trying to get them to bloom, I tend to kind of stick them in the dark. I'll talk about that soon. During the summer, I grow these more shaded. I take mine outdoors and I put them under a tree, very similar to what I do with a lot of my orchids, actually. So they're not going to get baked by the sun, and like I said, I'll know if they're getting too much sun when they start to get that reddish purple hint on them. And I think I actually talked about that with this guy in the fall time, because the leaves fell off the tree and it did start to get some purpling on here. And you can see it all worked out fine. No big deal. The main thing was that I made sure to kind of remove it from the sun a little bit before that went too far down, because it kind of started up here at the tips. The combination of the cool nights and the blazing sun was a bit much for it. And it did cause some kind of abnormalities, like you can see with this growth right here, from being switched around, but overall it came out okay. It still bloomed, so it was alright. But in the future, I'm going to remember when the leaves start to fall off my trees that I need to scoot them into a darker location, because these darker locations have something to do with their blooming. So around, I want to say August, September, with mine, I make sure that they're kept fairly dark. I actually take them off of where they're sitting, which is usually on a little table or on the edge of a wall outside, and I simply set them into a darker spot. Anywhere up to 13 hours a day of darkness, and then the cool temperatures in the 50s or so at nighttime, this is what helps induce them into blooming. I also slow down a smidge on their watering during this time too, for a few reasons. One of those reasons being, well, they're not getting as much sun, so if I'm watering them a lot, they're not going to take up all that water and it can lead to rot. These are a cactus, but they're a tropical cactus, so they like more water than your normal cactus does, but that doesn't mean they want to be in a soil that's retained the moisture for a very long time. That will rot them. But typically, I do let the soil go dry for anywhere up to 2 or 3 days before I'll water them again. But usually, I like to go ahead and water them probably within a good day of them becoming very dry. And I just test it with my fingers. You can use a wooden skewer, poke that down the soil and pull it up. Make sure that the skewer's dry before you go ahead and water it again. But I do water these much more than I would a desert cactus. And then when my nighttime temperatures start to drop into the mid-40s or so, that's when I move them on in. Some people would say that's too cold. It's been working okay for me, but every climate's different. And typically they're on the ground. So even when temperatures are dropping into the mid-40s at night, they're on the warm ground on a cement-type pavement. That's what my patio is. So they're still getting more heat. So if it's 45 in the air, they're probably not being exposed directly to 45-degree temperatures. But anyways, I move them in. And then generally within a week to 3 weeks of moving them in, that's when I start to see the buds. And this is when I really watch out for the humidity. Make sure that there's plenty of moisture around them, or else they will lose their buds. And I don't really do much more than that. If that sounded complicated, I'm sorry. That's just me fumbling with my words. I really don't fuss with these too much. I take care of them kind of like I do an average houseplant, except I make sure to go ahead and give them the dark period during about August and September, typically late August through September. Some people don't even start that until late September, October. Kind of depends on when you want them to bloom. For me, it just works out that way with the seasons changing. That they typically just get that darkness on their own, and if they don't, then I make sure to move them to the dark. Now the aftercare with the buds. I have found that deadheading these, well, one, it's not necessary, but also you kind of run a risk of snapping the whole pad off. So I usually let them dry off completely. And like you can see here, they'll fall off on their own. And you just pull them off like that. So you can see back here how these have just sort of dried up. And then they fall off on their own. This one right here is not quite ready to go, but it's still snapped off okay. This one right here probably isn't ready to go, but nope, there we go, it popped off. As long as I don't have to put too much effort into it, they'll come right off. And while this is mostly for aesthetics, they do kind of bloom in phases. Mostly just meaning that they tend, on mine, I've noticed some bloom before the others do. So I have buds in here while these are all blooming and blooming out. So by removing the spent blooms, I'm allowing more energy to go to the buds that are still developing. It's not entirely necessary. It looks much more... It makes the plant look nicer to snap those off. Like I said, if you have to put much effort into pulling them off, don't do it. Because they'll start to drop these on their own. And if you're being organic with it, you can save these. Sometimes in the past, I have saved these, dried them out, and then blended them up a little bit and amended my soil with them. I'm not going to do that this year because it's just a whole lot of work that I don't feel like doing, to be honest. And now this one is just about done blooming. This one started blooming for me, I don't know, probably 6 weeks ago. Maybe not quite that long. Whereas this guy just started pushing them out about 3 weeks ago. And I do typically like to keep them in a hanging basket for a reason. One of those reasons being that the flowers look the coolest, in my opinion, from beneath. You can look up there and see them better. So when it's hanging, you can really see the details of the flowers a lot better because you're looking at it from below the plant, like so. If you've never grown a Schlumbergera, I highly recommend them. They're easy, they're very rewarding. The flowers are so pretty, and they bloom at a time of year when a lot of other things aren't blooming, which is just a nice change. The flowers come in all different colors, typically reds, whites, pinks, and then there's variations of oranges with some like mild yellows you can find as well. This is a fairly common, this is just a magenta. Nothing spectacular, even though in my opinion it looks quite spectacular. But yeah, get online, look at the different varieties. There are tons and tons and tons, and every year there seem to be more and more. Okay, but yeah, that's all for now. That's how I Schlumbergera. That's how I get my Schlumbergera on. See, this is the side that was furthest from the window here. Wasn't quite as cool. Flowers were holding up much better on this side. Wait, I said I was done. I'm done. Hope everybody's doing well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what's going on in your garden with your cactus, your tropical cactus, epiphyllums, Schlumbergeras. Also, these are sold as zygo cactus sometimes. Should have mentioned that in the beginning, probably. You can follow me on Snapchat, Trop Plant Party, Instagram, Tropical Plant Party, and Twitter, Tropical Plant JC. I use Twitter more than anything else. Oh, I forgot to talk about this guy. I'll cover that in this weekend's vlog as far as actually doing it, but really, if you have a piece that snaps off, let the end callus over and lay it on top of a very dry soil mixture. Just on its side. That's pretty much all you have to do. Water the soil underneath it occasionally so that there's some humidity, and that humidity will encourage roots to grow in between the pads there. That's it. But if you need to see it in action, then it'll be in this weekend's vlog. All right, keep on growing, everybody. Bye-bye.